Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Teaching Artistry with Courtney J. Body. That's me. This is a podcast that celebrates artists and advocates for community engagement. And like you, I am at home and looking for ways to connect as face to face as we can. And so we are partnering with Creative Generation, where we are launching this video series, hashtag Keep Making Art. And the idea behind this is really to talk to creatives who are creating their own art, sharing their own art, as well as guiding and or creating opportunities for others to make and share art. And that's always exciting to me. So let's get right to our first and only guest, Jonathan Chapman. Hi, Jonathan.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you. How are you doing?
I'm okay.
Yeah?
I'm good.
How
We
are
are a month into time at home. I'm home with my husband and my 3-year-old,
you?
and we're making it through one day at a time.
And I love your little 3-year-old. What is he doing? How is he handling this moment?
I think 3 is a good age for this because he doesn't really have a concept of time yet. So he's not quite aware that he's not going to school every day.
Mm.
He's just sort of on this like endless weekend with his 2 dads, and he's kind of in heaven, having us both home.
Right.
But I've got to say, Courtney, I am so grateful for my teaching artist training because I am lesson planning every night for how to figure out, the structure of his day. We're doing process dramas. We're building forts and taking hikes in the house. It is magical.
Yes.
So I'm using every tool in the teaching artist tool.
Yes. And you can pull from Moominland and Cheese Boy.
Exactly.
You've got a lot of content to pull.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
So that's good. I mean, we sort of hit a wall this weekend, kind of taking a walk around our neighborhood in Port Washington, where you grew up.
That is my hometown.
And seeing how many people are wearing masks and kind of thinking, oh, even for a short walk, maybe we need to start wearing them. And that, that's hard to think about how to answer my 3-year-old who's asking, Daddy, why is everybody wearing a mask?
I just saw, I'll send it to you, but I just saw something on PBS with Daniel Tiger talking about exactly this thing. How do you talk to early learners or toddlers, little ones, about what's happening in this moment? I'll find it. I saw it on Facebook.
That would be great.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. Yeah, I mean, yes, I love Port Washington. Haven't been there in a long time. Grew up there. I live in Brooklyn and have for a very long time. And what I just remember was like sunsets and the water.
It's surreal, Courtney.
Right? It's
They roped the water off.
No.
You can't go down to the waterfront. It's police tape. That's when we really knew things were.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's rough because right now, like, I have a concrete backyard, courtyard thing that I'm trying to make like a tropical, like with my pineapple bevy. I sit out there at 6 o'clock after work. And try to make it as close to an oasis as possible when all I can see is the back of a brick building, and I can see a sliver of the sunset. It's the little things in life.
It's your little corner.
It's my little corner. It's like Courtney's siesta. That's what I'm trying to create.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your role. So what role do you have in arts and arts education?
Yeah, so right now I'm the executive director of Theater for Young Audiences USA, TYA USA, which is the national organization for theater for young audiences. So we're technically the American chapter of ASATEJ, which is the International Association for Theater for Children and Young People.
And it's an acronym. I love it.
Everything's an acronym, and that one's technically a French one, which is why we say TYA USA, not ASATEJ USA. And so we serve about 1,000 members nationally. And I feel like my role and our role as an organization has completely changed in the last month, as many people's has, and organizations have. So we shifted really quickly to think about how we could serve the national field, as I was recognizing how fast organizations were in crisis and individuals were in, having a hard time. And obviously everybody is having a hard time, but through my lens, the TYA and the TYA field is my focus. And I was watching how organizations were really struggling. So we, as a service organization, our job is really to support the field, to think about professional development, connection, advocacy. So we kind of scrapped all of our plans for the rest of the next couple months, and all of our programming has been in support of the field in response to COVID-19. So we started with a town hall webinar, kind of a cross community conversation. I had been speaking for weeks prior to organizations in the Bay Area and in Seattle. When it was fascinating to watch, because we're a national organization, we were kind of tracking change across the country. While Bay Area and Seattle were already in lockdown and talking about cancellations, other states were saying, like, put out Purell stations and wash your hands. I mean, it was fascinating to see how quickly things shifted, but it's sort of like dominoes. So when that was happening, we thought, let's get people in conversation, because this is clearly going to happen everywhere. And we launched a series of emergency affinity group peer-to-peer conversations, where I curated from our member list different groups based on role, because I thought, rather than kind of a catch-all, one-size-fits-all model of support, what people really needed was to be able to talk to one another who are sharing exactly the same challenge or situation. So we have a group that's artistic and managing directors of large theaters over a certain budget size, small TYA companies, education directors, university professionals, independent artists, touring agents, kind of different factions of the field. And we met with them really quickly. And now I've created a weekly structure where that group meets, and have a Slack channel for them to communicate in between. So through that program, we're serving about 400 professionals across the field,
That's fantastic.
which is amazing.
Yeah.
And then in addition to that, we launched a webinar series last week. Clearly, besides the financial implications and the cancellations and the staff furloughs, obviously were top priority in terms of conversation of how organizations were handling it. One of the big questions was around how content and art is going online. And so we very quickly pulled together the best practices of organizations around the country that were both doing family programming online and drama classes online, moving drama schools online. And we had webinars where we were offering those resources to the field. And we had about 200 people logging in for each of those conversations, which was great.
I was one of them this past Friday. I wasn't able to go to some of the previous ones, but that was very useful to hear folks who are further west than us, their resources. And actually what was interesting and maybe it was just that it wasn't a question that both me and my colleague, who Erica, we were both on it, and we were G-chatting, and she said, I haven't heard anybody talk about like print materials or digital materials. It was all video or streaming based, which is good for us to learn about. But there was something interesting about the fact that people weren't talking about that.
Yeah, it's true. It's all moving in the realm of video engagement. We also, I think, on a more inspirational or uplifting note, we were tracking how many companies and artists were moving towards digital engagement to serve their communities, both their communities locally and a wider net. And so we very quickly pulled together a weekly publication called TYA at Home, where we offer a roundup of those resources, both for professionals to see each other's work in this time, because a lot of the TYA field is siloed and doesn't get to see each other's work. So this is a moment where we can actually share, wow, look at this production I never got to see, I can watch it, or this is how this company does, family engagement. But we found that the resource is actually being used by families. We got over 8,000 hits on the first email, and it was being shared with families across the US who, are seeing productions from companies they never would have been exposed to. So that's pretty amazing.
That's really amazing. What a important role you're playing in this moment. I mean, I know for a fact because I work for an organization that is a member that benefits from these affinity groups and these conversations, the conferences, like all of that is very important for us to be continuing to think about high quality of our work, and learning from each other is such an important piece of how we continue to grow our field. And then to be able to, like you said, pivot and really be responsive and be a hub for connection and community and peer sharing is very, very valuable and super needed. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And it's one of the things I'm thinking about as a long-term effect of this, hopefully in a positive way, that this crisis has brought the field together in a way that we have never really, in my experience, been united before, and are having conversations where kind of organizational ego or walls are down. People are being, really vulnerable with one another and sharing in a way that we haven't necessarily, field wide. So I'm curious how the networks we're building now can sustain in better times, now that people are really connected in a way that I haven't seen, which is, it's interesting.
Yeah. I could expound on that, but I thought maybe we could showcase one of those roundups or one of the companies that you have had in the roundup. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So there are a couple of companies that move very quickly into being able to stream performances, mainly because they either got the rights fast or they filmed shows before they closed, right? So like the Alliance Theater in Atlanta has really been amazing in how quickly they responded. They had a production of Naked Mole Rat Gets Dressed, the Mo Willems and Debbie Wicks La Pluma musical that was in production. They filmed it days before they had to shut down, and they were able to stream it online. It's now been seen. They posted a graphic on Facebook today of all the states that it's been watched in. And they have a campaign where they're closing the show on the 12th. So meaning that the stream has to come down at that point because of the union regulations and their agreement with the licensing house. And so they're trying to get it seen by all 50 states. They have a list of like which states haven't seen it yet, and which really interestingly almost maps exactly to where we don't have TYA USA theaters, which is fascinating, right? Like that the reach is only reaching places where TYA large companies are. I can't I can't say anything about the correlation, in terms of hard data, but it's fascinating that the stream hasn't reached the places where we're as a field not reaching, right? So that's seeing what the Alliance has been doing. They have a couple of performances up. They started a virtual, their spring break camp went virtual this week. So they're serving 70 kids virtually from 9 to 3 in a camp format online, which is fascinating. Yeah,
I want to learn more about that.
Their curriculum design has been really interesting to track because it's both like small group at the computer, kind of go away and do a challenge in your house and come back and show. Really interesting structure. The kids can sort of create videos and then upload them into the system that they're using. If anyone's interested, there's a webinar we did last week. The recording's publicly available where you can learn more about what they're doing. So that's really exciting. Watching what Bay Area Children's Theater has done with their Creativity Corner. They launched like a whole new brand for family engagement with not daily, but regular video challenges where a character, there's like a video with a character, they give you a prompt, you go away and do the prompt at home and share it with them. And then Honolulu Theater for Youth has produced, basically they have an ensemble resident company. They're one of the only TYA companies where they employ artists and teaching artists full time to devise content. And when the theater had to shut down, they very quickly mobilized that ensemble to become a digital content team. And they're creating a weekly television show called The Highway, like Hawaii, The Highway, that they're filming from their homes, writing original music, original sketches. They kind of pulled as much from the theater as they could in terms of puppets and costumes, and it's to my knowledge so far, the only content that's being produced that's about COVID-19 for kids in a really like age appropriate, beautifully done way, where, you know, they have a segment like called Stuck at Home that's about a kid with two parents who are on, you know, screens and sort of overwhelmed, and it's a musical number about that. They have another sequence with a puppet with a mask and a kid asking like, why is he wearing a mask? And just really interesting to see the way that they've generated content about this moment. And to deal with access, they're putting it on, they built a relationship with local television studio or a network so that they can not only stream online, but have the content on TV to reach kids who might not have access to the internet at home in a way that they can see it. So really fascinating model.
That is a fascinating model.
Yeah.
You know, in all the different conversations, that's one that hasn't entered in our conversations. That's interesting. So I think that's another piece of what you're talking about, is just being able to see what people are doing, hear how they're doing it, and then going back to, you know, I think one of the exciting things, and perhaps a treasure burden, is that look at all this work that everybody's doing, and yet, you know, teams are and workloads are not as at full capacity as they normally are, right, in this moment. And so there's a bit of a teeter-totter, I guess, or, you know, there's a balance there that is challenging to manage.
Yeah.
And so like hearing about that is very inspirational, but also like, are we able to do that? I don't know.
Right.
But
right.
At least knowing that that programming exists, and some of the models and frameworks that they're putting together to do that work is helpful to at least just have the discussion and sort of pop other ideas for your organization or your work.
What has been interesting too is to see the ways that organizations are sharing each other's content for their audiences. So if they're unable to produce at the level right now online that others are, they're sending emails to their you know, patrons saying, look at all this TYA you can see from other companies, which I kind of think is an interesting idea in terms of serving your local audience with resources from another company in this moment. There's also, of course, the model of shows that happened in the past that companies are finding a way to stream, like Children's Theater of Cincinnati somehow got the rights to their production of Casper the Musical through Universal, and like all of the writers agreed and they were able to stream that in a limited way. And then on a personal note, Trusty Sidekick Theater Company, which is the company I co-founded, has basically decided to release as much of the canon of work that we've created through Trusty Sidekick online. So every Monday, the company releases a new show. You're looking at footage now of Up and Away, which is a show we created at Lincoln Center for audiences on the autism spectrum. This footage is pretty amazing. It's filmed in 360, so you can move the camera around. You can view it in a VR headset or move it around to see the whole immersive space, which is really cool. So yeah, as an artist, it's been fascinating to see, you know, shows that I created years ago with my ensemble of artists that I worked with and collaborators now available online to a much broader audience. So in the next couple of weeks, I'll have 3 shows that I've worked on as a director out there in the world for audiences to watch. And Shadow Play, which was one of our first shows as a company, has been seen by so many people now since it was put online a few weeks ago. So like all over the world. So that's been really incredible to in this moment not necessarily have the capacity to be creating art, but watching my art that I have created, you know, having this reach while kids are stuck at home, and really inspired by the leadership that's running Trusty Sidekick now, in the way they very quickly said, let's figure out how we can get permission from our artists to put all of this stuff out there, because kids need us right now, and families need us. Yeah.
Families definitely. Kids need us. They need joy, right? And they need and we have it. It's just a matter of how can we share it. And I love the model that you were just talking about, of how even if there's an organization who either is putting out their own content or not able to in the moment, but sharing because it's serving their constituency,
Yeah.
regardless of where the content is coming from. I keep taking my glasses on and off because I'm trying a new thing, everybody. I'm trying. You know, I just had a moment. Can we just have a moment for a second about how we know each other?
Yeah. We seem to know a lot about each other,
I
Courtney.
know we know a lot, and how like when we first met, you moved into the building in Brooklyn that I used to live in.
Yeah.
Now you live in my hometown.
Just
What
following all the
is?
places you lived, Courtney.
Don't go to all the places.
I also lived at your desk. I took your desk at the New 42.
You did. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, it's really, I mean, I love you, but it's really also just, no, I'm to be serious though, like I've always been like a big fan, but I'm really in these types of moments, it's always fascinating to see who rises to that challenge and is clear about what that challenge is and how to support. It's very evident in what you just described and what I've been able to see to date. And so I think that's really great.
Thank you. I feel that way about you and the work that you're doing.
Thanks. Let's segue though. You
Yeah.
talked about your art making. What other art have you been making? Have you been able to share that's not necessarily associated with Trusty Sidekick?
Yeah. So in the last couple of years, I've been collaborating with actually many artists who were associated with the Trusty Sidekick Ensemble on a project at my synagogue at Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, which is the largest LGBTQ synagogue in the world. It's where I got married. And when Elior, my son, was born, I just started noticing like the disconnect between what I knew from the Theater for the Very Young community internationally and Jewish programming. And so this idea was born to create a program that brought Jewish content and stories to life for early childhood in a synagogue context. So not in a theater environment, but in a synagogue environment. So they're interesting. They're sort of these hybrid performances, interactive workshops, and ritual engagement, all kind of rolled into one called Agada Adventures. And so you're seeing some of that footage now. We had, experiences planned through this time that had to be canceled. We had one for Purim, which was days before. It was March 7th. So it feels like a lifetime ago, but it was right before everything really shut down. We were already starting to think about how do we clean props and how do we make it safe for people to be in the space. And but it's been one of the most special artistic projects I think I've worked on. Just that mixture of using theater toward ritual and community and engagement, for a new audience and transforming a synagogue space into a theatrical environment. So now that we can't be in the space, luckily we were able to utilize footage that you're seeing a trailer of from last year's production of Passover, and we'll be releasing the full show video tomorrow so that audiences can experience it at home in advance of their Seders or their celebrations for Passover. And we've been offering some online engagement content around that production as well, ways to use stuff around your house to bring the story of Passover to life. So yeah, so that's the stuff I've been engaged in most recently artistically. And then, like other artists, thinking about how to move that online now that we can't publicly gather, which is, my two worlds that I've been working in, the theater and the synagogue space. It's just surreal to think about both of those spaces not being open right now to gather when, it's like, I feel like I've spent my entire career in public gathering. So it's a weird thing to not be able to do.
I don't want to. I think it's great. Again, finding ways to pivot and be able to share. But pivoting, but being able to share, and it's such a sacred time. And so I think there's, again, when people have high anxieties, I'm sure there are people who normally celebrate Passover who are trying to figure out how to do so in this moment. And the fact that you all are able to then say, oh, well, there's this something that you can do and create, using art to actually celebrate despite the moment that we're in and the fact that you aren't able to do it the way you traditionally would, right?
Yeah.
I think that's important for people to hear.
Yeah.
You
And
and I were,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask my next question, my next and last question. So if you had something more to say it now.
It might dovetail. So
Yeah.
you go for it.
Okay. So before we started recording, we were talking about the ability to look long term or long distance and still be responsive and focused on the moment. And so I guess my question to you is like, what should we be thinking about now in order to figure out what the positive change should and could be coming out of this social distancing health crisis?
Yeah, it's such a complex question, and one that I feel like, we're still sort of figuring out our way through. It's so hard to think beyond tomorrow. I mean, it's something I've been thinking about a lot and reading about from people I really admire, is that what is the role of artists right now? And after this time, there's no doubt that we will need a way to process this. We will need a way to understand this time and what it meant to us and what it meant to the world. And as hard as it may be, I wonder how artists can document right now, live in this moment, create around it. Because when you think about moments in history of times of horrible oppression or times of horrible events, we look to the art that was created in those times to know what it was like.
Right.
And, so what will the art be that will look back on from this time to sort of understand it years from now when we're telling the stories of when we were all isolated and how hard it was and how scary, this disease was. So that's one thing I'm thinking about. What is the role of artists, like documenting now and also telling these stories moving forward?
Right.
And using art and storytelling as a way to process and cope. And in terms of the field, and what happens to public gathering, I don't know. I'm still in a hopeful place that once we all collectively feel safe, that we will need to gather again. That that all of this online engagement will not deter people from actually gathering physically.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I believe that the work for young people will come online faster than even work for adults, because our kids will need that connection in a big way. They already do. But also, maybe we need to be, looking at not now, definitely not now, but eventually looking at our work in a critical way in terms of the structures we've built around making art and the way that we treat artists and the way that we treat teaching artists and the very, shaky house of cards that is our industry, because it was able to collapse so fast, right? And so many people are out of work and organizations in crisis. How do we build it back in a way that is more sustainable, in a way that can weather more? Is that possible? What if we have this opportunity to kind of rebuild? How do we build it in a way that we want it to look, rather than just rebuilding the way it was?
Yes.
So that's
Thank you for
yeah,
saying that, because that's what I was thinking. Like, I don't want to be a Sisyphus.
yeah,
I also had the image of the Weeblers, the Doozlers in Fraggle Rock. Like,
yeah,
break it and then they just keep building, but like, to what end? And
exactly.
I love what you're talking about, and I loved how you sort of went. None of them were micro, but there was something about like what traditionally or what we've experienced to this idea, the spectrum, I guess, of how do we shift paradigms and affect policy
Yeah,
and really create that, what you were talking about around sustainability. But what I'm curious about, what I wonder in regards to that, is how can we be utilizing artists now? Some will document, yes, but how can we actually be utilizing artists now who don't have a lot of things to do, frankly, besides create freely, not necessarily being commissioned, but actually commission some artists to start thinking about and or documenting how we actually build that infrastructure so that it isn't a house of cards that gets blown away by,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, this came up so one of our affinity groups is an individual artist in TYA.
Mm-hmm.
They're an amazing resource, and for me, I love just hearing their conversations and picking their brains. And one thing that came up in today's call was the idea that now that we're all home and we have this moment, maybe not today, but soon, is there value in cross-community conversation around the rebuilding and having representation at each of those tables of organizational leaders, independent artists, teaching artists, education teams, because all the walls are kind of down now.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just
Um,
thinking also politicians. I in my
yeah,
back
yeah.
courtyard where I like to create my siesta. There is a couple there that um, I've started talking to, and we were talking about the fact that there were the federal work program uh, coming out of the Depression, going into the war, and how important that the role of artists were seen then, and building a different infrastructure. Of course, it did go away, but I think that that's a model that we should be looking
Yeah.
to and improving upon. But that's the world that I want to start living in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Jonathan, we could keep talking for hours and hours and hours, and
I know.
but I just thank you again for being our guest. Thank you for sharing all the different ways that Theater for Young Audiences organizations are sharing art and really trying to make sure that all of our families across our nation and globally have access to arts. In the fact that we're still at home, and for sharing your own beautiful art. And I love how personal that work is, that you've created around the stories and the rituals of your religion. And I adore you. So thank you
I
so
adore
much.
you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for watching. Keep making art with Teaching Artistry with Courtney Fay Body.